Drafting Notes, the sister podcast of Page One, the Writers Podcast. I'm Marco, and I'm joined as always by Tariq.
Hello.
And we use this series of episodes to talk about one thing around writing or around the publishing industry that throws up questions, I guess, either for us or for others. In these sort of shorter form episodes, just to have a chat through it and see if we can work it out for ourselves at least. And one topic that I think is very important, especially to writers that are, either about to be published or trying to find agents and all that sort of stuff, is, getting known in the industry, networking, which is a horrible word. We all hate it from our day jobs, but and it's not a natural thing, I think, for a lot of writers to want to do, because normally it's a very solitary thing, but it is actually quite an important, or it can be quite an important thing, I think, in establishing yourself in the industry.
I completely agree, and I think you kind of touched on it there, and that's certainly where my mind always goes straight away when the word networking is used, is kind of back in the day job. And for people who don't know, Marco and I actually used to work in the same law firm a few years ago now, and networking at this...
We met through networking. No,
we did. And it's the things you would always groan. You would go to an event and you would watch a few talks, and you'd be the dreaded lunch break, and you'd be like the only person there who knew anyone, and the thought of having to go and make small talk to people over like a paper plate of like crappy melon, you'd be like, I'm just going to stand by myself in the corner of the room for 45 minutes.
Look at my phone.
And then watch the rest of the talks, then go home. And so I mean, networking is a horrible thing, and everybody does hate it. But I think, unfortunately, it is something which is really useful, especially when it comes to writing, because as Marco says, you are by yourself the whole time in your room. You don't. It's not like you're working for a company that is doing the heavy lifting in terms of advertising or branding and stuff. It is all kind of on you to some extent. And I think also networking as a writer is very different than networking for a corporation or a legal or a company or whatever. It's much more relaxed, and certainly I think we both found it's been much more friendly. Like, it's just a really nice
it is.
atmosphere.
And also I think the difference is as well, you're actually, well, certainly in my case anyway, you're doing it for you as opposed to for your company or whatever, which can make a difference to people as well. But so there is a reason behind it, and it can be helpful. It's not. This isn't to say that you must do this. You don't need to. But the thing about writing is, as we've learned over speaking to so many authors and editors, etc., on the main podcast, is that it's an industry where you could write the greatest book in the world, and it might never be picked up, or if it is picked up, it might never sell anything because it's not known about. So you do have, this goes, we did another Drafting Notes episode about self-promotion and stuff, and I guess this is sort of linked to that as well, but this isn't so much about blowing your own trumpet on social media and stuff. It's more getting known in the right circles of editors, of agents, of other authors as well. So you're a known quantity, and people will talk about you, will talk about your book, will want to read the stuff that you're putting out there, and in a way sometimes help promote it through blurbs and all of that sort of stuff.
100% agree. I think the blurb point is a really good one. I think the contacts and the friends that you make in the writing community are a great source of assistance when it comes to needing people to quote your book. Ask them, would you read this book? Would you give me a quote to help put the buzz out there? And as you say, Marco, I think when it comes to meeting editors from other publishers, etc., you never know 5-10 years down the line when you're going to be out on submission again. The fact that having a personal connection can only be a good thing. I think everybody has a kind of reputation of some kind, big or small, in the industry, and I think the worst thing you can do is have a reputation as being a bad person.
Yes.
Because you're awkward to work with, or you're difficult, or you're not a nice person, etc. And that will only harm your chance of getting book deals, etc. down the line. And I think Whereas the opposite is, I think, conversely true. I think if you are known, you are good to work with, you turn in stuff on time, etc., that's all only going to help you. So I think it's all promoting yourself, pushing out an image of who you are and what kind of work you do and how good you are to work with, and that helps on so many levels.
I mean, it's the general rule of, the don't be a dick rule.
Yeah.
When you're interacting with other people, don't be a dick.
Yeah, when you go to festivals and stuff, just nice.
So I was going to move on to that. Like, how do you network as a especially if you're not already published and stuff? One of the best ways is to go to a local literary festival or book festival or something like that, because as you alluded to earlier, most authors are actually, really friendly and they want to speak to people, and they'll go to the bar. And, a lot of these festivals will have a central bar where people will gather, and it's often called BarCon, where everyone hangs out and just chats, and you'll see, some of the biggest authors in the world chatting to readers, chatting to aspiring authors and stuff like that. So, and it can be intimidating that first time you go, obviously.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Most of them, as I say, are pretty friendly. And to be honest, if they're at the bar and they're chatting away to people, then they probably are okay. But I go back to the don't be a dick rule. If they're sitting having a conversation with someone, don't just barge in there and with a copy of your manuscript saying, "Can you read this?" or something.
I've certainly seen that happen. I've seen someone going up to an agent in a bar and saying, "Oh, I sent you my book. You haven't got back to me yet. I've got it with me. Can we go have a talk about it?" And it's a really awkward, uncomfortable thing to do, because you put that person on the spot. They're not there to talk about submissions, and you're kind of forcing their hand, and also it makes you come across as a kind of difficult person to work with. They're probably not going to sign you up, there and then, are they? And so stuff like that, I think, avoid any of that kind of weird, dickish behaviour if you can, if possible, at all possible.
No, I think that's right. But also, and on the other side of it, do go and just hang out, chat, and chat with. You don't need to chat with the big authors necessarily.
No,
go and chat with
plenty of us.
Go and chat with but even go and chat with the other people who haven't been published, who are still looking for agents and stuff.
100%.
You'll find bonds there that might last your whole writing career if you can do that. And then, of course, they might know some authors, and you can get introduced to them that way, and all of that sort of stuff.
I mean, how many times have we talked to people in the podcast who have found a way in to getting the book out there to do a channel that's not the usual submitting to agent? It's all been a random right place, right time. I was talking to someone at a party who knew someone, or I was at I think that it just shows you that the more you put yourself out there and put yourself in a position that you're surrounded by people who can make it happen, and you're in that and you're plugged into it a little bit, and you're kind of chatting to people and you're making connections, it's only a good thing, and it's only going to lead to the possibility of something happening down the line. So there's no downside, I don't think, beyond that kind of innate, horrible going to a kind of room with people you might not know very well. And I totally get that. That is a kind of horrible.
Yeah, like I think if you're going on your own, then these things can be intimidating. Yeah. So that's why, if you're going to a festival like that, go with a friend or something. At least the worst that can happen is that you go and see a talk maybe, and you have a drink at the bar or something like that with your mate, and that's the worst thing, But like I say, these events can be very useful for meeting people, for talking to people, even just an introduction that, as you say, can then stick in their mind maybe when you send your query to that agent or things like that, that maybe makes you stick out.
I've got a question for you. Sorry, Mark. Yeah. If you had written a book and you were chatting to an agent in a bar at a festival, if you then submitted to that agent later, would you make reference to having had having met them? Would you say something like in your query letter, "Oh, it was nice to have met you at Harrogate or Bloody Scotland," or whatever, to kind of make that connection, like maybe mean something?
Absolutely, I would. As long as I adhered to my rule.
Yeah, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you were the asshole."
If I hadn't adhered to my rule, I would change my name. No, but no, yeah, you're wanting to. with query letters, and we should probably do a separate drafting notes all about query letters. But with query letters, you're wanting something that will make it stand out because they get so many queries. So if it is, if you have had a nice conversation with someone, absolutely just put that in. Don't expect it to mean anything other than they'll probably read the query letter. You're not getting any other foot up other than that. But anything you can do to make yourself stand out a bit is helpful, and that goes back to what you said, which is just interact with them normally, be a nice person, and walk away if they're clearly wanting to do something else or something, But I was going to expand on my rule slightly, so you can do that at festivals. One other thing that we have had guests on the main podcast talk about is that sometimes people will write to them saying, I'm trying to get a book published or all of that. And often authors will be open to that and want to give out helpful advice.
Yep.
But again, there's a very, it's fine being complimentary and maybe asking for a bit of advice and that sort of thing. But don't send a manuscript to them and say, please give me your views on it, or can you pass this to your agent?
Yeah.
Or, because we have heard horror stories like that as well, which is the wrong way to go about things entirely.
And I think, as you say, most writers are very active on social media. They might have a contact part on their website, which which is there for a reason. They are genuinely happy to speak to people. And I think certainly my experience of talking to authors both on and off the podcast is that people are really happy to talk shop and to talk about how they got published and advice and and the goss of what's going on in the industry and where they think the big movements in terms of trends, etc. That's all. I think writers spend all, and I guess agents and editors spend all their time in this world in their head. It's probably quite nice to get it off their chest and actually talk about in person with people. So I think they are genuinely willing and wanting to chat, and it does make for a nice kind of collegiate environment. Yeah,
and every author will remember what it's like being at that starting point in the query trenches or whatever, and they have sympathy for that, and they'll often offer a word of advice if they can, if they have time, and if they think they can offer something helpful. The other way of networking, I think, is if you can't get to a literary festival, if you don't want to approach an author directly, is find either a local writing group or even an online writing group like a Discord or something. We're both part of a Discord called Edinburgh SFF, where there are published authors at all stages of their career, some of them very big, some of them just starting out, and lots of aspiring authors as well. And it's just a great community, and people are willing to help there and have chats and all of that sort of stuff. We've got our own Discord, of course, on our Patreon as well, which is small just now, but growing. And, that's another place where people can come on and talk and ask questions about the industry, because, as we know, this industry isn't always the most transparent at times. So,
I think that's a very good point. I think, we talked about the fact that going to festivals can be a bit daunting if you're by yourself, and I think if you're able to make connections with other writers on like a Discord or a writing group, a local writing group or somewhere, that's a great first step to kind of get your foot in the door, and then perhaps as a group, maybe a bunch you then go to a con or a festival together. Like it is all networking. You don't have to be networking with Lee Child and Stephen King. You can be networking with any author at any level who are all talking about their own work and ideas and where they're going to go and what their path is, and I think the more you lean on that and you use that, it's only a good thing.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's right, and it does serve a purpose as well, because when you do at any stage of your career, I think it serves a purpose, because whether it's querying and you're wanting just an agent to remember you, or when you're published but you're wanting to get blurbs or get comments from authors, or even some advice from other authors in your field and all that sort of stuff, then all of this is useful because you're known and they know you already.
Yeah, I think it is a journey, and no matter what step anyone is on that path, there's always another step. There's always people saying, well, I'd quite like to get into film writing. How
Yeah,
I want to get into
exactly,
script writing, or I want to get a blurb, or I want to maybe want to change agents. And you've got all these questions about what do I do. You know, these are the people who have. There's people who have done it. There will guaranteed be people who have done the thing that you're trying to do, and that's the person to ask. What was your experience of it like? And that is networking in a nutshell, right? It's finding someone with a similar experience or an experience of something which you want to learn from, and you kind of talk to them, and you kind of get pally with them, and they find out what's going on with the whole situation, and it's all just a kind of, and honestly, it's a very nice. Certainly, I mean, crime writers anyway. I don't know about romance writers or fantasy writers, but crime writers are lovely people, and I can't imagine they'll.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is. It's always been a very nice atmosphere at festivals whenever we've gone to stuff. You know, it's very open and friendly, and everyone's always willing to chat and stuff. And yeah,
and I think you've just got to read the room in terms of, you know, don't go in there and say, right, I've got a 7-book series here, I'm going to pitch it to you now.
Yeah,
you know, just talk normally like you would people. You want to get to know them, and then you can absolutely ask them questions about the industry, about this, about that, and I'm sure they'll be happy to help. But well, I don't know, those are our sort of mixed thoughts on the question of networking. I certainly, like, in my day job, absolutely hate networking.
Same.
I find it very difficult to make small talk about stuff.
It's also funny because I also feel that in my day job, networking doesn't really help me much. Like I don't feel like it doesn't. I feel like if I go to a legal talk and I talk to someone in my lunch break, it's not going to make any difference to my day-to-day work, or you know, I kind of fail to see the relevance of it, and unless it was like you're trying to bring in clients and that kind of like level of networking, which I've not been involved in, but. I think a lot of times networking is kind of pointless, and it's almost just like, here's a bunch of strangers in a room together, talk for 45 minutes. Like, and it's kind of, why?
It's sort
What's
of
the point?
Presenteeism that's wrong.
Yes, exactly.
A lot of jobs, I guess.
And I think you're right as well, that it's the fact that writing it's your own career. It's directly impacting you, so there is more of an urge or a need perhaps to network to make a name for yourself a little bit.
Yeah, but also it's easier to do because you're actually
100%.
Talking about something that you're passionate about.
Exactly,
and you know about 100%. You know what
That's a very good point,
your writing is about.
Yeah.
So you're quite. It's easy to have a conversation about that.
It's very boring to have a conversation about something which you.
If you've been to I don't know, some legal talk that is only tangentially related to your day-to-day job, then there's less to chat about there, I feel. But maybe that just shows our approach to to the legal world. But yeah, hopefully this has been of use. Please do let us know if you've got any tips or experiences, or good or bad. You know, it's always good to learn from the bad experiences as well. You can put comments in, if you're watching this on YouTube, down below, or send us an email. We'll read it out either on this podcast or the main podcast, or just get in touch on one of our social medias. We're at UK Page 1 on most social media. But if you've enjoyed this, Drafting Notes is a series of episodes that we release on a sort of timed exclusive basis on Patreon. You get that 3 months in advance before it comes out on the main YouTube and main podcast feed. But you also get other great benefits through the Patreon, including joining our Discord, where you can chat with us and other writers as well.
Networking.
So, you can do some networking on there. So please do check that out if you haven't already. But otherwise, we will speak to you on the next episode of Drafting Notes.
See you later.